Woody was wondering what mice and men could possibly be planning together. Surely not the building of a better mousetrap. What, asked Fate, when he heard the boy's unspoken words, deciding when to speak up, and the cogs turning in his head. Woody felt apprehensive about voicing his concerns, considering Fate's reaction the last time that one of them had questioned his navigational expertise. Out with it, or we are not going any further, Fate informed them, and then he folded his arms. Just wondering, said Woody, realising he had no other choice than to voice his concerns. How do we know we're heading in the right directions, as we have not seen any signs since we left the land of opportunities? Much to the boy's relief, Fate never overreacted. Which way do you think we should go? He asked the youngster. Up that way, perhaps, straight forward. Why would you choose that way? Well, we don't want to go back to where we've just come from, do we? So I chose that way because everybody's future is always in front of them. Woody looked at Fate, searching his demeanour for acknowledgement that his answer was correct. Fate nodded at Woody and his observation, letting him know that it was indeed correct, before continuing with another one of his teachings. Although nobody really knows what kind of a future may be waiting to meet them tomorrow, next week, or in 3 years' time, there is a way to gain a clearer understanding of what one's future has in store. Before Evan or his young self had a chance to even think of a way to increase the predictability of their future, Fate enlightened them. The best way to predict one's future is to create it oneself by working to obtain the one that you want, and quite frankly, the one which you deserve. Fate continued with the lesson. Sometimes, regardless of how much preparation goes into one's planning, life will test your resolve with a curveball. He paused and then asked, You know what they say, don't you? Once more, before Evan or Woody could answer, Fate came back with, The best laid plans of mice and men. And then he trailed off, leaving Evan wishing they had finished the saying, for it was never quite sure of the ending, whereas Woody was wondering what mice and men could possibly be planning together. Surely not the building of a better mousetrap. And so they started walking again, unaware that from behind the roadside wall they were being observed. A handful of scruffy urchins secretly observed Fate, Evan, and his young self walking along the road. Every one of the vagabonds was short in stature and wore clothes that were so tatty that they looked as though had been dragged through a hedge backwards. Though not your normal type of privet hedge, but rather a hedge full of brambles, prickles, and spiky bushes of hawthorn. The number of holes and pulls in their clothes was matched only by the amount of threads which were hanging down all over the place. Earlier that day, in a different field, they had seen the scarecrow, who politely asked them to leave the field, fearful they may cause its redundancy. Behind the wall, they whispered their plans, plotting and scheming how best to bring about the downfall of the 3 travellers. Let's jump out and ambush them, whispered one of them, his voice all sly and sneaky. Yeah, come on, let's get them, agreed another of the scraggly connivers. There are only 3 of them, let's get them. The one at the back of the gang, the scruffiest, scraggliest of them all, said, Me and Detriment can get that kid at the back. Detriment agreed, saying, We should easily be able to get him. He's not that much bigger than me. Truth be known, Woody was probably a foot taller than Detriment. The vagabond at the front told him to be patient and that attacking them from the back was no use. What we need to do is get in front of them, then attack them, split them up first, and then... Hey, Thwart, who appointed you leader? Inquired one of the gang, hoping that the others would back him up. I am the leader until the boss gets back, snapped Thwart. What makes you the leader? Asked Impediment again, wondering where he had found the courage to challenge Thwart. Who else believes that Impediment should be in charge? Thwart asked of all the others, feeling confident that no one would be on side of the young upstart. Not me, replied Thwart's first ally. Nor me, added another. The remainder of the gang moved towards Thwart, letting it be known where their loyalties lay. All but two were in union that the biggest, for he was nearly 4 feet tall and probably the toughest, should take charge until the return of their leader. By now, Fate, Evan, and the youngster were nearly out of sight, so Thwart suggested that they all run in the field to catch up. Once the scruffy schemers had caught up with the travellers, Thwart told them to bob down and sneak past in order to lay in wait, ready to ambush the unsuspecting walkers. Impediment wondered why they needed to bother bobbing down, and thought that it just went to show that Thwart thought he was bigger than he really was. Are you all right, young man? Asked Fate of Woody, who seemed unusually quiet. The boy looked a little sheepish before finally saying what was on his mind. I could do with a pee. We will walk in front of you to where the road narrows and bends. Then you could go here, suggested Fate. Woody looked a little apprehensive, so Fate added, You'll be all right. Nobody's going to see you. There is nobody around. That's what he thinks, whispered Burden, one of the conspirators who were eavesdropping from behind the wall. Woody had little option but to agree with Fate's suggestion, so Fate and Evan walked down the road and around a bend in order to give the boy some privacy. Evan's apprehension for his young self's welfare whispered in his ear a single word of concern. Traffic. These highways, which we're on, have so far been void of any motor vehicles. Should I be concerned that the boy may get knocked down? Only for absolutes on motor vehicles in personificadia. His omnipotence, who appears to be away on business, Providence, whose parents are both ill, so she is at their bedside, and Nemesis, who is involved in ensuring that Integrity's first assignment goes smoothly, and then of course myself. So no need to be concerned about road safety, my friend. Meanwhile, Woody sprinkled the grass at the side of the road. Ah, yes, just what I needed, he sighed. Shall me and Detriment get him now that he's by himself, whispered Cumbersome, becoming all excited at the prospect of wreaking some havoc on the lone child. No, this needs teamwork, said Thwart. He then went on to explain his battle plan and give them their orders. Ready? He asked. Ready! They all shouted back. Woody looked up, startled by the voices. He wondered who it was, and that they were ready for. He was about to find out. All of them pushed hard at the wall in unison, sending the wall toppers tumbling down into the narrow road. Woody had to jump out of the way in order to avoid the avalanche of stones. The consequence left a wet patch at the front of his jeans. Again, shouted Thwart, and again they all shoved, with each one managing another 2 or 3 stones apiece. And again, shouted Thwart. Once more they pushed, and an entire section of the wall tumbled down the grass verge and into the road. Rah! They all shrieked with delight, as they surveyed the results of their combined effort at putting a halt to the boy's progress was separating him from his two companions. Aha! One more victory cry, and they scurried away as the two big ones, Fate and Evan, came running up the road. I'm all right, assured Woody, in response to the concerned shouts from the other side of the rubble. The fallen wall had completely blocked the road where it narrowed, and even though he could see them, the unison was separated from his older self and Fate. Go up the grass verge and into the field, around the wall and back to us, instructed Fate. No way, objected Woody. I'm not going into that field. I'll climb over the rubble. No, go around, insisted Fate. Climbing over all this lot could be dangerous. You could twist your ankle, or worse, maybe even break it. I'm not going into that field with all of those, whatever they were, insisted the youngster, already partway over the pile of stones. That would be dangerous. As he appeared at the top of the stones and started climbing down the other side, Fate offered him a helping hand. The youngster accepted Fate's offer with his free hand, as his other hand was clutching the black pouch, using it to cover the damp patch of embarrassment. Did you see them? Horrible scruffy things they were. Then he went on to describe the wall destroyers who were trying to put a halt to his progress. Fate recognised who they were from their description and informed Woody and Fate they had been expecting them to show up throughout the entire journey, and was surprised that they had taken so long to show their faces. Fate explained that he was not surprised that a few of them had turned up together, as it seemed to be the case that whenever one of them showed up, then another one or two were guaranteed to appear. 1 or 2? Exclaimed the youngster. There were more than 1 or 2. There was a great big gang of them. Woody started to describe how big they were, but when he saw Fate's all-knowing expression, he opted for just mentioning the fact that they were small and scruffy. Who were they? Evan asked. Snags, replied Fate. Snags, of course. Why did I even bother to ask a question that owned such an obvious answer? Evan laughed and shook his head a little. No wonder my childhood memories and dreams are so weird and wonderful, prompted Woody. Yes, I suppose that's one word to describe them, agreed Evan, especially after this weekend's events. Fate suggested that they sit a while to discuss how best to deal with the Snags when they next showed up. And have some refreshments, suggested Woody. So they sat down on the grass verge with Woody in the middle, taking a moment to relax and contemplate their journey. Evan looked at his young self, licking the chocolate off a biscuit and drinking the juice from the bottle. He could see goodness in his young self and was aware that just about everything that the boy did and said was honest, decent and innocent, not the least bit deceitful as he was to become. I wonder what changed him. He began to search his inner self for the answer. He tried hard to think back to the day at the old derelict mill with Scooby and his brother, and what had happened that had turned such a good lad, as his mother used to refer to him, into the thief and liar that he was to become. When we're alone and I get a chance, I'll take Fate on one side and ask him why I changed. And then, as Fate had been hoping, it just dawned on Evan that the incident or the day in question was not that long ago, only yesterday for the boy, or perhaps today. He then realised that himself, as a boy, had not gone to the old mill because he was here with Fate and himself the elder. Therefore, whatever it was that had happened on the day at the mill had not happened, and that the chain reaction from boiled pranks to petty thief and then to full-blown criminal, had been broken. In fact, the chain had not even formed its first link. Further, if Woody kept his promise and found some new friends, then the innocent boy he was looking at now would stay just that, innocent, honest, and free. Everything which fate had told him now became clear. He realised how fate had intervened just at the right moment, and how much fate had done for him and was still doing. He looked at fate sitting there with his younger self, and wondered how he could ever thank fate for what he was doing. Fate felt the man's eyes upon him and looked up. Everyone wanted to speak, to say something other than thank you, some deeper words, which would adequately express his heartfelt gratitude for being such a tremendous benefactor. He thought back to the moment just before fate had emerged from the darkness in his garage, and the sentiment became clear. Guardian angel, he thought. You are both welcome, fate assured Evan, once again understanding his sentiments. To truly show me your appreciation, make the most of this chance which you have both been given. The depth of my reward will be measured by the extent of your success, morally, spiritually, and of course financially. Evan promised that he would not let Woody hurry himself down, and that in no way would he ever disappoint fate. He vowed not to squander the chance which he had been given, nor waste his opportunity. Once it had been explained to him how it worked exactly. Me neither, added Woody, and he waved the golden opportunity and black pouch in the air. He then realised that if the pouch was in the air, he could not be covering his damp patch. He looked down to where the stain of embarrassment should be, but it was gone, dried by the sun's warmth. Time to move on, Fate told them. While they walked towards a small signpost, Fate emphasised that they should not let themselves be put off if they encountered any further snags. There's no if about it, whispered Cumbersome's big brother, Detriment, who was hiding behind a wall with his allies. I've no idea how we managed to end up coming the wrong way, said Fate, sounding rather serious as he stood looking at the signpost for the futures. He was pointing in the direction which they had just walked. What do we do now? Asked Evan. I've no idea, admitted Fate. Do we have to turn back? Evan found himself reluctantly asking. I know it's this way. I can't understand how we've ended up coming the wrong way just because I took us on a detour through the land of opportunities. But the signpost does read the futures, and it is pointing back that way. Fate continued with his charade, not wanting to let Evan and Woody know they had taken the backwater way in order to avoid a possible confrontation with his omnipotence. Don't believe everything you read, interrupted Woody. He was stood on the grass verge at the other side of the road, pointing down at a hole in the grass. When Fate took hold of the signpost, it wobbled about, and he was easily able to lift it from the ground. Snags? Asked Evan. Snags, confirmed Fate, as he took the sign back across the road to where it belonged, while smiling about the fact that the boy had overcome a problem on his own accord. Damn, grumbled Detriment. I'll get that small one, he promised, and he vowed to get even with the boy for foiling their plan. The Snags ran in front of the travellers in order to prepare their next ambush. Where did you learn to question the things which you read? Asked Evan of his young self. From wisdom and his friend experience. They taught me lots of things. Oh yes, I remember now, said Evan, as Woody's memories became his, and then they looked at one another, feeling a little bit weird. Fate and Evan were most impressed and thankful that they could continue in the right direction along the road to their futures, thanks to Woody. Shortly down the road, the anticipated encounter with the Snags occurred. Unfortunately, they had brought along reinforcements, and now numbered 8, or maybe more. Each one of the Snags had enquired some sort of weapon, even if it was just a big stone to throw. Others, including Detriment and his big brother Cumbersome, were menacing and waving sticks in the air, acquired from fences which they had vandalised. Some of the others had fashioned spears and coshes from tree branches. One of the more vicious-looking Snags was holding a long bramble and was making slashing noises with it as he whipped it through the air. Detriment was grinning, trying to look as intimidating as he could, and being quite successful. Waving the bramble at the boy, he was now ready to fulfill his vow of getting the small one. "I'm going to get you," he hissed, "and I'm having whatever's in that pouch." Woody was used to brutality, but the notion of being assaulted by an armed gang was a whole new dimension in physical abuse. The boy tried to look fierce as he readied himself for the attack. Evan started cracking his knuckles. One of the Snags gulped at the sound of the cracking bones. Fate pulled his arm free from the rucksack to let it fall to the ground, but he got caught and tangled up in it, and the top he was wearing ended up covering his head. He threw the top and the bag to the ground, in anger at the Snags and frustration at the rucksack. He stood there, glaring at the Snags, feeling furious at their audacity. Everything went quiet as the dense muscularity of Fate's body left the Snags in no doubt that they had chosen at least one wrong individual to pick a fight with. Evan was silent too, and it now became clear to him how Fate had managed to shake him around so vigorously in his garage. Evan and his young self were both grateful of the fact that Fate was on their side. "You're in for it now," cried a defiant voice from the back of the Snags. The absent leader of the Snags had returned and came bounding over the field wall into the road. The Snags all cheered and chanted his name, "Hidrance, Hidrance, Hidrance," like the echoes of a tribal war mantra designed to put fear into the enemy's heart. He swept his way through the Snags, pushing some of them aside as he was nearly 2 feet taller than Thwart, the tallest of the scruffy urchins. When Fate saw Hidrance making his way through the Snags, he bent down to pick up his top and then acknowledged the Snags' leader. "Hidrance, you old scallywag," he greeted the latest arrival. "Fate, you marvellous sight for sore eyes," replied Hidrance as he placed his arm around Fate's shoulder. "Fate," said Thwart, looking proper scared now. "Fate, it's Fate," gulped Detriment, as he realised the danger they had put themselves in. "Whoops," said Impediment, dropping the rocks which he was armed with. All the Snags followed suit and began dropping their weapons. "Sorry about them," said Hidrance. "I forgot to mention that you may be passing through while I was away. Anyway, how come you come this way instead of the more direct route?" Fate looked at Hidrance as though he was about to let him know the real reason for his detour, then changed his mind. Just took the scenic route, he decided, was a more appropriate manner in which to keep Hidrance and his covertness in the dark. The words "sorry, sorry, sorry" echoed around the gang of Snags for a minute or two, until at the end they all ended up shaking hands with Woody and Evan. Detriment went over to Fate in order to apologise and shake his hand, but Fate's hand stayed down by his side. He was not willing to befriend the Snag who had directly threatened to hurt Woody. Detriment went and stood next to his brother with his head lowered, reluctant to look at his newly acquired adversary. Thwart slipped his top back on and then reminisced with Hidrance about the times they had worked together in days gone by, while Evan, Woody and the Snags shared the 2 large fruit pies that were in the rucksack. Everybody became friends with one another. In fact, Woody felt so at ease with the Snags that he even showed Detriment what was in the black pouch, as a way of showing him forgiveness. Detriment congratulated him and told him to use it wisely. Woody wanted to ask what that meant and what he was supposed to do with the sparkly sphere, but somebody else asked the question instead. "Any more food?" asked Cumbersome, just before he pushed the final piece of pie into his mouth. "You had enough," Hidrance assured the Snag, who was already beginning to develop a bit of a pot belly with his excess consumption of calories. "If you get fat, you'll be no use to us." Cumbersome muttered something under his breath, and then added a cough to try and cover up the fact that he'd been a bit mouthy. Both Thwart and Hidrance looked at him. Cumbersome shrank into himself and thought that he ought to apologise. Thankfully, though, Hidrance appeared to let it slide, because he had other responsibilities to attend to. He was enlightening Thwart as to how long it would take them to reach the Futures building, now that they had come the long way round. Evan wondered if the Futures closed early on a Sunday, as Thwart appeared a little bit restless about some sort of a time schedule, which surprised Evan, considering the conversation that they had had about the rate at which time passes in Personificadia. "It's not very far," Hidrance assured them. "Just walk along the road for a few minutes until you come to a ravine, then cross the ravine via an old wooden bridge. Once on the other side, you're almost there. I must warn you, though, to cross the bridge one at a time. As I said, it is old." "Well, yes, the wooden bridge," said Impediment nervously. "Don't tell me you've destroyed the bridge to prevent them from getting across the ravine to the Futures," said Hidrance despairingly, directing his comments at all the Snags. "It wasn't any of us," insisted Impediment. "It was that awful thunderstorm last night," he assured them all. Previously, though, most of the Snags had felt thankful for the fact that when they had arrived earlier in the morning, their mission of destruction had already been carried out by the weather. "Come on, my friends," said Hidrance, as he once more put his arm around Thwart's shoulder. "Let's go and survey the damage. I'm sure that if we all work together, we can sort something out." Thwart smiled, but something in his eyes told Evan that he did not believe that the bridge could be repaired. As they walked, Hidrance constantly tried to reassure Thwart that everything would work out fine. But as they reached the edge of the ravine, Thwart's fears about the bridge were confirmed. It lay in ruin at the bottom of the gorge, down there. The water of the river ran over the bridge instead of beneath it, a final act of irony to show that the journey had ended in failure, with Thwart's efforts falling victim to the elements. Thwart looked dejected. Evan tried to look hopeful, and most of the Snags just looked at their feet. "Don't worry," said Detriment to the youngster. "You shared your pies with us and the story of how you captured the golden opportunity, so I'll show you where the rock steps are." "Steps? What steps?" asked Hidrance, worrying how one of the Snags knew the whereabouts of something which he himself knew nothing about. "How come I don't know about these rock steps?" "You don't know everything," replied Detriment, instantly wishing his words had thought about the consequences of being heard before coming out of his mouth. "Sorry," exclaimed Hidrance, not quite believing his ears for the second time. "So," said Thwart, thinking it was for the best if he interrupted the conversation that was sure to turn into an altercation. "Where are these steps?" Detriment pointed along the edge of the ravine. You see where that rock there just juts out? Well, that's where the first step begins. Simply go down the steps, across the river. Well, it's more of a stream. Well, a brook, really." His words were being very careful not to say the wrong thing again. "Then there are some more steps at the other side, which you just have to climb up." Woody wondered if this poor, pathetic stream was any relation to the powerful river that gushed over the stepping stones. As they parted company, Woody was about to say, "See you later," and then decided it might not be such a good idea. So instead, he said, "Bye then." Fate said farewell to Hidrance, and they gave each other a backslap hug, while Evan just said goodbye to all the Snags in general. True to his word, Detriment had pointed them to the top of the rock steps. The steps were large and grand, though covered in dirt, dry grass, and a few loose stones. Woody thought how scruffy and untidy they were. Before they began their descent, Woody turned for a final look at the Snags, just in time to see Hidrance plough cumbersome and then Detriment round the back of their heads. The rock steps had not been expecting any company, and the top one wished it had made an effort to smarten itself up. One of the other steps tutted as the travellers made their way down to the bottom of the ravine. "Typical," he complained to the next step down. "Nobody bothers with us for years and years, and then as soon as the bridge is out of commission, everybody assumes they can walk all over us." The travellers soon negotiated the steps, and with the river dwindling to a brook, crossing the ravine was easy, and they were soon at the base of the other set of steps. Large and easy to climb, it was no time at all before they were on the top step and facing their final challenge, their futures. As they walked, Woody smiled about the fun which he derived from giving life to inanimate objects. "I fit right in here," he thought, "with all the marvellous entities whom we keep meeting." Whereas Evan was beginning to feel occasional twinges of sadness about the fact that he and his young self would soon be parting company. Fate, on the other hand, was looking forward to getting the journey over with safely before any final mishaps could occur, or before his omnipotence returned.